Hey everyone. When feminists talk about her story, they're talking about women's histories from a feminist perspective. However, certain groups of women get little to no attention from feminists. This series brings attention to women feminists ignore. The women I showcase are female criminals, sex predators, and domestic violence perpetrators. It's important to bring attention to these women and their stories because many of them, by themselves, completely debunk the false feminist narrative that women are always the victims and men are always the perpetrators. With that out of the way, meet the New York domestic violence police officer, Valerie Cincinnati. You may have heard of her because the New York Times recently did a story about her. Police officer hired a hitman to kill her husband and young girl, officials say. Now, here's a copy of the actual criminal complaint filed by the FBI in the court in the state of New York. And this is the third statement. It states, a confidential source, CS, has advised the FBI of the following in substance and in part. The defendant, Valerie Cincinnati, requested that the CS hire a hitman to murder John Doe, Cincinnati's estranged husband, and Jane Doe, the CS's minor daughter. The CS told Cincinnati that the CS knew someone who would do it for $7,000. Okay, so basically it goes on with the facts here. There's a lot of facts. I'm not going to read them all. Just going to touch base on that. But as you can see, this is the criminal complaint, and it is filed in federal court, the U.S. District Court in Long Island, and it was filed on May 17th, 2019, according to the file stamp. And as you can see on the very top in the red, that is the electronic filing. I believe that's from a program called Pacer, which the federal courts use. But it's interesting is that ABC News reports prosecutors argued in a detention memo filed in court on Friday that the evidence in this case is overwhelming. The defendant was captured on audio and video recording planning the murders, and once she was advised that the murder of John Doe was affected, she was captured on audio and video planning her alibi and destroying evidence of her involvement in the crime. Cincinnati, who's been on the job since 2007, had been on modified assignment since 2017 because of prior domestic incidents involving the boyfriend and the estranged husband, law enforcement sources said. In the memo, prosecutors noted that Cincinnati's first husband obtained a restraining order against her in 2014. Now, that is a civil domestic violence protection order. Now, I love how they call it restraining order, but this was because of domestic violence. Okay? That both she and her estranged husband also have existing restraining orders against each other, and that she had a volatile history with the boyfriend, who was, by the way, the one who tipped off the authorities to the alleged murder plot. He's like, wow, the sex is probably great, but you're crazy. Now, here's some fast facts about Cincinnati, and this is from theheavy.com. She is accused of conspiracy to commit murder after being arrested by the FBI and the NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau. Cincinnati was ordered to be held without bail after a judge decided that the suspect posed a danger to the community. Now, she's been on modified duty since 2017 because of domestic violence. According to online records that show Cincinnati is a cop out of the Queens 106th Precinct, speaking to NBC News' New York affiliate, an official said that Cincinnati had been on modified duty and was stripped of her gun stemming from a 2017 domestic violence incident. In other words, they conducted an internal investigation. She was allowed to keep her job, but they just decided to take her gun away. So think about that and take all the time you need. Now, even though this is a damning story about a female domestic violence perpetrator, what makes it even more troubling is the reality that Valerie Cincinnati was a member of the domestic violence unit at the New York Police Department. She was actually a domestic violence cop. She was the person who investigated domestic violence incidents, and yet here she is plotting the domestic violence murder of her estranged husband and his child. Yeah, his daughter from a previous relationship. There are a few things about this story that deeply concern me. First, why is it that no single news outlet reported all the relevant facts related to this story? I mean, why did I have to search over a dozen stories to get a full picture of this domestic violence murder-for-hire cop? Most of the stories I did find never published a picture of this DV perp. Second, why is it that the facts most damning to the false feminist narrative regarding domestic violence were buried in the middle of the news stories rather than showcased at the beginning? Which brings me to my third question. Why does the New York Police Department protect and allow confirmed domestic violence perpetrators to work for them in their domestic violence department? I would never trust a police department that employed confirmed criminals. Yet, not only did the New York Police Department allow this DV perp to remain employed, they never arrested her for any of her crimes. It was the FBI who, in the end, investigated and eventually arrested this DV perp. I mean, this is a New York police officer actively working in the domestic violence unit and has a confirmed history of committing domestic violence. The police department admitted that Cincinnati is a dangerous DV perp when they took her gun away from her. After the internal investigation found out she was too dangerous to carry a gun and is the subject of multiple domestic violence restraining orders, why didn't they ever arrest her? Why was she allowed to keep her job? Here's the thing. This case is typical of the gynocentric legal double standard in the United States and all over the Western world. We all know that had this DV perp and attempted murderer been a man, feminist pundits and activists would be swarming all over this story, and this man would get crucified in the press. His picture would be in every paper, every news story, and he and his DV crimes would be showcased all over the media. The truth is that domestic violence is not a crime committed by men against women. It's a crime committed by both men and women. But the studies I've mentioned in prior videos have shown conclusively that women commit one-sided domestic violence at far higher rates than men. Now that this story is hit, the gynocentric left-wing media will probably black out this story, and the feminist-controlled courts will work as hard as they can to prevent this female domestic violence perpetrator from seeing the justice in prison that she deserves. I'm DDJ, and this episode of Her Story is your dose of misandry today.